You'll hear that. All right, so welcome everyone. So far, we have a few other people who probably will be joining us from time to time, and we'll admit them. If you will please stay on mute, and then we'll have some question and answer time at the end, I think is kind of what we talked about or planned. But we are so happy to have Mason Ziegler. He's such a great policy person with the Michael J. Fox Foundation. I've gotten to know him a little bit over the last year. So it's just great that he carved out some time for us today while he is on Capitol Hill, right there on the lawn, for some hearings about the Parkinson's Act. So I am going to turn it over to Mason, let him tell you a little bit more about him, and then start with our webinar.
Awesome. I really appreciate that, Anne-Marie. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen just so you can see my slides.
Sure.
Just give me 1 second and I'll get that pulled up. There's some beginning. Beautiful. Okay. So hello, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day to listen to me present on advocacy in the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. A huge thank you to Anne-Marie and the Parkinson Association of the Carolinas for hosting this webinar. And in case you have not heard, I mentioned earlier on the call, we actually had a hearing today on behalf of the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. So it's very serendipitous that this meeting is scheduled at this time. I actually just left the hearing room where we had an advocate testify on behalf of the bill, and it's been awesome. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about myself. These slides will be shared with you afterwards, so don't feel like you need to take notes. But my name is Mason Ziegler, and I am one of the Michael J. Fox Foundation's federal lobbyists. This means I meet with advocates and their federal policymakers to discuss issues important to the Parkinson's community. In my role, I lobby on behalf of the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. But I also have a specific area of focus in access to care. And this includes things like health coverage, prescription drugs, telehealth, some emerging topics. But I also want to note that I'm originally from North Carolina. I graduated from the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill in 2019, so I'm a Tar Heel. And actually, I'm a double Tar Heel because I'm currently pursuing my master's degree at UNC remotely while living in Washington, D.C. I've been a lobbyist since graduating from UNC, and I formerly lobbied on behalf of the National Rural Health Association, and now for the Michael J. Fox Foundation. As a rural North Carolinian with a personal connection to Parkinson's disease, I have the privilege of using my education to advance public policy on behalf of the people who are important to me personally. So it's been awesome. Here's a quick outline of my presentation. We're going to kick off with a quick introduction or a refresher on what policy advocacy is and what it isn't. And then we'll do a deep dive into the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. And then finally, we're going to wrap it up with how you can get involved, which will include some information about the tools the Michael J. Fox Foundation has pulled together. And at the end of the presentation, as Anne-Marie said, we'll have time for questions. So as your questions come up throughout my presentation, please do jot them down and ask them at the end. Before I jump into advocacy, I want to mention that we have a Parkinson's Advocacy Toolkit online through the Fox Foundation. If you Google Parkinson's Advocacy Toolkit and NJFF, you will likely find the links to this toolkit. But I'm going to hit the high points of what's included in this toolkit. So alongside a nation network of advocates, the Michael J. Fox Foundation works to ensure federal and state government policies are supportive of people living with Parkinson's disease today and their loved ones, and that there's dedicated research towards a cure. As members of the Parkinson's community, you advocate on behalf of yourself or your loved ones all the time. You advocate with your doctors so they understand your symptoms, and you let them know how your treatments are impacting your life. Public policy advocacy is very similar to this. It's actually advancing the public support for a recommendation of a specific cause or policy. You can see an example on this slide is support the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. We can even get a little bit more specific and say, please co-sponsor the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act, or support the bill as it goes before the committee to the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. Each of these is just, again, public support or recommendation on behalf of a specific cause or policy. Advocacy can take many different forms. There's several different ways you can take action to advocate on behalf of the national plan and other policy priorities that are important to you. For example, you can write your member of Congress to voice your support or opposition to a specific bill. You can also meet with your members of Congress and their staff virtually or in person to share your position or request their support. This doesn't have to be a dedicated meeting between yourself and them. For example, the Michael J. Fox Foundation actually helps schedule meetings with advocates in congressional districts across the country throughout the year. And members also host town halls and open forums in their districts and states too. Also, I want to mention calling your members of Congress is a quick and easy way to acknowledge your support for a policy for their office. I want to note real quick that research indicates that the more personal the form of advocacy, the more likely it is that your request will actually be heard. So what does this mean? Well, although all these different forms of advocacy are important and impactful, we know that some are more impactful than others. Writing an email or a letter is helpful, especially when there's a high volume of them that staffers receive. But staffers who pick up the phone when you call actually make a note or tally, and they report that to their member at the end of each week or sometimes by the day. Also, we support advocates taking action by meeting with the members of Congress and their staff. We know this can be incredibly impactful. In summary, each of these tactics is an important tool that you can use to help your members of Congress understand why a bill or a policy is important to their constituents. And for a second, I want to focus on that why. So as a member of the Parkinson's community, like I said, you're an expert on how this disease impacts the lives of constituents of your members of Congress's district or state. You can speak to the challenges of accessing care, from getting an accurate diagnosis and understanding Parkinson's symptoms. You can also speak to how it's impacted your life, your finances, your job, your family, and what it means for your future. We understand that explaining these challenges can be difficult, but they go a long way in helping staffers and their bosses empathize with your experiences and other members in your community. I also want to note that when you advocate, you do not only have to focus on the challenges, but also how you've overcome them, whether it's finding community through a boxing course, a support group, an exercise class, or a walk event. It's important to explain how our community is resilient, organized, and powerful too. Sharing your story helps your members of Congress learn what it's like living with Parkinson's disease or loving someone with Parkinson's. So they understand why it's important to support the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. While getting your whole Parkinson's story into a few short paragraphs is basically impossible, focusing on one or two components is a great way to share insights into certain aspects of your life and also humanize the impact of Parkinson's disease. You are their constituents. So when I say constituents, members of Congress often hear the word voters. You can provide details about how Parkinson's has impacted your life. Your personal story really does go a long way, and staffers take notes and share them with their bosses. For a second, I also want to talk about what advocacy is not. Advocacy is not simply making a demand of a staffer or a member of Congress one time. It is making a request and providing context about how it impacts their constituents. Advocacy is not about being rude. A large part of it is actually about relationship building. These are people, after all. Showing staffers that you're seeking to help them come around to the right decision and building trust with their offices is important. And that kind of work can be disrupted if you're rude or demanding. And advocacy isn't a single one-off action. It can be, but we know that's not how you become effective. Advocacy requires both persistence and patience. And it's rare that the first time you meet with a congressional office that they take your request to their boss and do exactly what you'd like them to do. A large part of the first meeting is actually bringing them up to speed about the issue, why it's important, and how they can be helpful. They may need more information or time to run it up the chain of command, or reminders about what the request was and how it will help move the ball forward. Something I try to warn advocates is they're likely to meet with someone who looks like me. Many staffers you encounter are 20-something-year-olds living and working in Washington, D.C. They're trying to do right by their boss and learn about the issues important to constituents. And they likely have 15 to 20 other meetings in a given day, the day that you meet with them, and they're likely not experts on Parkinson's disease. Once they get it per se, they can be your biggest advocates or allies on the inside. Take time to help them empathize with your experiences, share the facts of what you know about the disease, and help them help you by getting their boss to take a stance on the issue. So I want to talk really quickly about some tips and tricks that I share with advocates. Before the meeting, prepare. You don't need to know every detail of the legislation, but it can be helpful if you can tie some aspect of your personal story to a part of the bill. You need to know the name of the person you're meeting with and the request that you're making specifically, whether it's to co-sponsor the bill, secure their support before the committee markup, things of that nature. You're also welcome to bring notes to these meetings or events and reference them as you speak with them. That's very common for advocates to bring notes to meetings. During the meeting, be polite and remind them that you want to be a resource to their office. Do not treat the meeting like a one-off. Again, remember, advocacy is about relationship building. It's not simply about making a demand. And it can take a while to get an office from a maybe to a yes. As best you can, try to stay focused and on topic during the meeting. Too often, meetings become diluted because someone wants to take everyone down a tangent or a personal issue. As best you can, we want to keep the attention of the member or the staffer you're meeting with focused on your request. And during the meeting, don't answer questions that you don't know the answer to. It's perfectly okay to tell the person you're meeting with that you will follow up with an answer to their question after the meeting. And that leads me to the last section of follow-up. You do want to follow up with these offices after you've met with them, whether virtually or in person. You can share a written version of your personal story in connection to Parkinson's disease. Sometimes offices actually keep a record of these stories that they receive from constituents, so members can reference real-life examples and how issues impact their constituency specifically. Also, in their follow-up, reiterate the request that you made during the meeting and ask them when would be an appropriate time to check in on the status of your request. When I host congressional meetings with staff and advocates, I let them know we'll follow up in the next 48 hours with our personal stories in writing. But given what's happening on Congress right now, when is the best time for me to follow up with you? Because I know you have a ton on your plate. I did this a lot actually at the end of May during the debt ceiling debate that was going on Capitol Hill. And many of the offices said, hey, if you could just hit us up in the end of June, that would be awesome. So it's great to get that insight from the staffer themselves about when's the best time to follow up with them. And throughout the entire process, I just want to say thank you. It's important to be polite, understanding, and gracious with staffers and their bosses. They may forget something that you said, or they may forget the request that you're making. And we want them to know that we're their allies on issues and we're easy to work with. So now that I talked a little bit about advocacy, I want to discuss the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act, specifically its policy objective, where it is within Congress, and how we plan to advance it. So as you can see on this slide, the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act is first ever legislation in Congress focusing on preventing and curing Parkinson's and ensuring quality of life for people living with the disease today. The legislation seeks to create an advisory council comprised of both federal representatives from the federal government that already work on Parkinson's disease, as well as people within the Parkinson's community, including people living with Parkinson's, their caregivers, their healthcare providers, and representatives from nonprofit organizations with experience or expertise in Parkinson's research and Parkinson's care, like the Michael J. Fox Foundation and others. This advisory council will create a strategic plan to end Parkinson's and will be responsible to Congress for reporting back every 2 years on its progress and its impact. I want to talk about what I call the 3 pillars of the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. We are obviously focused on funding research towards the cure at the federal level. I think people, this is what they most often assume when we talk about the national plan and what they tend to think about. But we're also talking about improving access to care for people currently living with Parkinson's disease. We know that there are current deficiencies in Parkinson's care. It can be really hard to get an accurate diagnosis or see the right kind of specialist, and we want to address those issues to the national plan as well. And then finally, we also want to prevent people from getting Parkinson's disease if at all possible. We know there are known environmental factors or triggers of Parkinson's disease, and we want to prevent people from coming in contact with those to ideally prevent future cases of Parkinson's disease. So these are the 3 pillars of how I tend to characterize it with congressional staff and what we're talking about when we say the national plan. Here is the most current update of the national plan, where it is in the House of Representatives and the Senate. You may remember that the national plan was actually introduced last Congress as HR 8585 and S 4851, but because Congress ended without the bill being passed on January 3rd of 2023 of this year, it actually has to be reintroduced. And so we worked with our congressional leads, including Representatives Gillirakis and Tonko, and Senators Capito and Murphy, to have that happen early on within the this Congress. So now the bill numbers are HR 2365 and S 1064. These are the bill numbers that we reference with congressional staff whenever we meet with them, and you can find these bills online by searching these numbers. You can see that in the House of Representatives, we currently have 69 of the 435 potential co-sponsors of the national plan, and it's been referred to the House Committee on Energy and Commerce. Today, I want to note that we actually have a special occasion where there's a Health Subcommittee hearing on the national plan. We actually had a witness testify before the subcommittee just this morning, and that's why I'm on Capitol Hill right now, just outside the Capitol building, actually. But in the Senate, we have 12 co-sponsors of the 100 senators, and it's referred to the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, sometimes called HELP. When I talk about committees, it's important because as bills are introduced into Congress, they are referred to committees with jurisdiction over that policy topic or issue area. So for the national plan, the way I tell people to remember is House ENC and Senate HELP. Those are the abbreviated versions or names for those committees. Why I want to talk about the subcommittee hearing today is because of the congressional legislative process. So you can see on this slide that when bills are introduced, they're assigned that bill number. So again, it's HR 2365 for the bill in the House and S1064 for the bill in the Senate. Right now, in the House, we actually have gotten to the point of committee action or inaction. We believe that the subcommittee today will favorably report out the bill, and ideally it'll go before the full committee, but it could go to the subcommittee for a markup in case there are members of Congress who believe there's necessary edits or changes. That's another important thing to note, that as of right now in Congress, these bills are identical. As they work their way through the legislative process, there are sometimes edits or amendments that are made to these bills to get the votes necessary to pass the bill out of subcommittee, the committee, the chamber, into the next chamber. You can see on this sort of graphic over here that as bills are passed out of one chamber, so in the House, they go to the Senate. What's beautiful about Congress, though, is that they can walk and chew gum at the same time. And so the bills are actually working their way through Congress right now synchronously. So we have bills moving, a bill moving in the House as well as a bill moving in the Senate. So the process doesn't have to start over entirely once it passes out of one chamber. If there are differences to the bills as they're made through this process, the bills go to what's called a conference. And this is a time at which the differences between the bills can be resolved before it's signed into law by the president. And once it becomes law, that actually spurs regulatory activity. And that's basically just the implementation of the legislation itself, which is what we're really looking forward to. So I just wanted to give you an insight of where we are currently within the legislative process. Again, there's going to be links throughout this presentation that you can reference afterwards. The link on this slide specifically links to a video by the Library of Congress that does a great job of explaining this information, maybe even better than myself. So I want to talk really quickly about how the Michael J. Fox Foundation ourselves is engaging in advocacy on behalf of the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. We're doing this through direct lobbying. So myself and two other people on my team actually schedule and line up meetings with members of Congress and their staff throughout the year, even before the bill was introduced and especially afterwards. Our goal is to meet with congressional staff as well as advocates, so grassroots advocates, to talk about why this legislation is important. We believe that the work that we're doing is to behalf of the Parkinson's community, and they need to be involved or engaged in this effort. This is actually a big reason why I'm talking to you today. We need to bring advocates up to speed on what the bill does, where it is within Congress, and how they can help get it passed. We can't do this alone, and so that's why you can see just in the direct lobbying, we talk about grassroots and grass tops advocates. Grassroots advocates are anyone who has a passion for advocating on behalf of this bill. Grass tops advocates tend to have special connections with their members of Congress. Maybe they worked with them in a previous life, or they actually coach their kids' soccer team. And they happen to have their personal cell phone number, can call them up and say, hey, there's a bill working its way through Congress, and I could really use your support. So we're working through both strategic grassroots and grass tops efforts to get this bill passed. We're also working in tandem with coalitions like the Unified Parkinson's Advocacy Council, of which the Parkinson Association of North Carolina, or the Carolinas, is a member, and others with a vested interest in this bill passing. We also are doing this through a public relations campaign. We are getting placements in national and local media publications to make sure that we're beating the drum in Washington, D.C., but also back home about this bill and why it's so important to people living with Parkinson's disease. So for a moment, I want to highlight that we have a National Plan Action Center online. And we try to make it as easy as possible, have one place for advocates to see information on behalf of the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. And I'll share a link to this in the chat if you haven't seen it already after I'm finished with my presentation. But this resource really includes a lot of the great information that our team has produced as the bill has been working its way through Congress. There are ways for you to call and write your members of Congress, and also share this news with your network. So I want to focus on one resource specifically, and this is the National Plan one-pager that you can, again, find on our National Plan Action Center. This one-pager is actually specifically designed for congressional staff, and it includes all the information they might need if they're considering sharing this bill with their boss to become a potential co-sponsor. It's made for congressional staff, so I want to walk it through with you guys, just so advocates are aware of what's included in this one-pager and why the parts are important. So we're going to start from the top. The top, it tells staffers exactly what we want them to do. Please co-sponsor the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. It is bipartisan, which is important, especially in Congresses with narrow margins like ours. It's legislation that is no cost. There's not a cost specifically associated with setting up the advisory council itself. And for the first time, it's going to unite the federal government in a mission to cure and prevent Parkinson's disease and alleviate the financial and health burdens, not just on the federal government, but specifically American families, and ideally reduce government spending on the disease over time. Next, the section is just on the policy objective. What does this bill actually do? We have these overarching goals at the top, but what does the bill do? This explains that it will create this advisory council comprised of federal agencies and departments that support Parkinson's research, care, and services, but also people living with Parkinson's disease, their caregivers, their researchers and healthcare providers, as well as non-federal experts. And again, the goal of the council is to ensure the efficient and effective coordination among these federal entities responsible with managing, treating, and curing Parkinson's disease. We also include some fast facts about Parkinson's that help staffers understand the severity of Parkinson's disease in the United States. It is the second most common and fastest growing neurological disease, second most common just behind Alzheimer's. As more than 1 million people in the United States are living with Parkinson's disease, including a disproportionate number of veterans. This is an important talking point, especially for members of Congress who happen to serve on Veterans Affairs committees and things of that nature. Also, we know that many more people are being diagnosed each year with Parkinson's disease, at least in the United States. Around 90,000 new diagnoses are made each year. And we know that Parkinson's is very expensive. Half the annual cost, $52 billion per year, is shouldered by the federal government, and the other half is actually shouldered by patients and their families. And we know that that cost is only going to be increasing. By 2037, we actually believe the cost will skyrocket to $80 billion per year. Finally, I want to talk about the last section of the one-pager. And this, again, reiterates our request for them to co-sponsor the bill today, and we provide them with the lead staff contact. So Representative Billirakis and Tonko are leading the bill in the House, and you can see their staff information listed here. And in the Senate, there's Stella Moore-Capito and Senator Murphy, and again, their staff contacts are there. And at the very bottom of that one-pager, we include staff contact information for the Michael J. Fox Foundation in case they want to ask us questions directly. So that is the National Plan one-pager, but we also include links for frequently asked questions that we're receiving for the Parkinson's community. For example, we've been often asked, does this bill incorporate Parkinsonisms or Parkinson's-like diseases, such as multiple system atrophy, corticobasal degeneration, progressive supranuclear palsy, and Parkinson's-related dementia? And yes, it does. This bill actually defines Parkinson's disease as Parkinson's, but also each of those diseases as well. And you can find this frequently asked questions website, again, on that National Plan Action Center. We try to keep everything in one place so you can find what you're looking for. And then also, this is how you can get involved. So participating in these campaigns is what we call them, or action alerts. You can call your member of Congress and you can get a pre-drafted script, which I'm going to review with you in just a second, so you know exactly what to say when you call their office. You can write your member of Congress. We actually provide you with a pre-drafted email that is editable. And I want to emphasize that it's editable because it's important to include your personal story if you're able to. What's awesome is that the messages that actually include personal stories are more likely to be read by members of Congress and their staff. So we highly encourage advocates to not just hit submit, but really do take time to include a snippet of their personal story as they're drafting those emails. And then finally, there's ways to share this news with your friends and family. It's not just people directly impacted by Parkinson's disease that need to advocate on behalf of this bill. It's about the people who also care or love for the ones living with Parkinson's disease today. We want a groundswelling of support from anyone who's interested in this bill passing. So I mentioned I wanted to flag the phone script that is linked on our website. This is what you'll see whenever you click the Call Your Member of Congress button. We ask you to tell them your name and where you're calling from. This helps them understand that you're calling from the district or state that they represent. You're also calling them to co-sponsor the national plan to end Parkinson's Act specifically, and we include the bill numbers within the script, so you don't have to memorize those. Also, we include a brief snippet of what the national plan seeks to accomplish, and then again, reiterating the request for their support of the Parkinson's community by co-sponsoring this bill. I also encourage advocates to include a brief snippet of their personal story in a phone call. They want to know how it's impacted your life specifically, but I will say that these phone calls tend to be very brief. They can be anywhere from 30 seconds to a couple minutes. But the idea here is that you're sharing your support for this legislation, urging them specifically to co-sponsor the bill, and they are going to make a note of who calls their office. Finally, I want to encourage you to think about how you might be able to take action today, whether it's emailing or writing your member of Congress, calling your members of Congress office directly, or inviting them to join you for a group meeting, a support group meeting, or boxing class, a community event. Members of Congress, especially when they're not on Capitol Hill during what's called congressional recesses, love to engage with patient-specific communities when they're in the district or in the state. So definitely think about, and if you want some help on these types of activities, please reach out to myself. I'm happy to help make these happen. We know it can be incredibly impactful for members of Congress to meet in person and shake the hands of people living in their community who will be impacted by the national plan to end Parkinson's Act. That's my presentation, and I know it was pretty quick, but I want to open it up for questions and make sure that I'm answering them with your time today. So again, thank you for hearing me out for the last 30 minutes.
And I'd like to say something to everyone. I have done the phone call, and as Mason said, it's so simple. I mean, it really is. It's just looking at that script. I filled in the lines ahead of time so I wouldn't forget, or I'd have everything ready. It's really very simple. Even the email, you know, like you said, it was so easy. They basically have done everything for you, and you just have to fill that in. So.
I'll also say, once you participate in those campaigns, we'll often reach out to advocates to participate to see if they want to join a meeting with their member of Congress, because these advocates have indicated their interest and support for this bill. We reach out and say, look, we have a meeting scheduled 2 weeks from now. Would you be interested in joining? We actually host a brief prep session just so you know what the meeting is going to be like, how to formulate your story and tell it during that meeting. And then sometimes, especially for you guys, since I lobby at the Southern members of Congress, you actually meet with myself, and we'll join about 15 minutes ahead of the actual congressional meeting, and I'll coach you on exactly what the meeting is going to run. We'll make some introductions, we'll talk about the bill, and I'll explain that process to you. So I don't want to feel like it's a very new thing or it's going to be overwhelming. I want you to know that we're going to be with you at every step of this process. We'll even be prompting you to do the follow-up after the meeting. So as Anne-Marie said, we try to make it as easy as possible for everyone to get involved.
Yeah, it really is. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask of Mason regarding the process or the plan? Feel free to come off mute and ask your question. And just so you know, we did record this, and so we will be sending it out to everyone who's here on today, and then everybody else who registered. And we'll give you a lot of that information that Mason talked about ahead of time. He put in the chat the link to the national plan through Michael J. Fox, and we'll send that as well. So yeah, feel free. This is your chance. Ask those questions. So I know a pie in the sky kind of question. I mean, how long does something like this typically take, you know, through the process? Are you thinking like 1 year, 2 year, and just, you know, how long do we need to make sure that we keep involved and do this?
That's a good question. And I will say it comes down oftentimes to political will and the opportunity to pass legislation. Especially in recent Congresses, there have been very few legislative packages, so big packages of bills that are pushed through Congress all at one time. They're often done on a very partisan basis. What we have going for us, though, is that this is common sense, bipartisan, no-cost legislation that should be able to make its way through Congress fairly quickly. Many bills are actually introduced multiple Congresses. As the national plan, we were introduced at the very end of sort of the last Congress, in the last half of the second year of that Congress, and then reintroduced very early on in this Congress. So what we're excited by is that we have more time this Congress before January 3rd of 2025 to get this version of the bill passed specifically. So we believe we can do it in that timeline, if not by the end of this year. Having committee action already within 2.5 months of the bill being introduced is very exciting. We know many of the people who are in leadership within the House and also the Senate have a personal connection to Parkinson's disease and a vested interest in seeing this bill pass. So we're really excited, ideally by the end of this year. If not, we're going to try as sure as heck to get it passed by the end of next year.
You're a little passionate. It's okay. That sounds great. That's I think that also helps to motivate people, you know, and like, wow, this could happen really soon, and to keep at it and keep going. I noticed that Bill Martini has his hand raised. Bill, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. First, thank you, Mason, for the overview. You mentioned a few minutes ago, if we do get the chance to speak to someone in the congressional offices, are we then to inform you that we've done that, or how do you know that, you know, we've done that, we've reached out?
Yeah, so you are welcome to reach out to your congressional offices and not let us know at all. There's a lot of advocacy that's actually happened behind the scenes without us knowing, and members who will hop on the bill without us ever having to meet with their office, and that makes my job so much easier. I will say, if you would be interested in having us join those meetings or just supplementing, providing you with information, you let me know and I'm happy to help make that happen. But by no means do you feel like you have to report to our team that you're having meetings with the members of Congress. And if you are doing that, I love it. I really appreciate it, because that's the kind of advocacy that we want to inspire advocates to take part in. It doesn't always have to be directed by just one organization or by federal lobbyists specifically. We want advocates to understand that this is something they can do regularly, whether it's on the national plan or other pieces of legislation or policy priorities important to them.
Thank you.
Good question. Anyone else want to come off mute and ask a question? Anything about, like I said, the process, or getting more information about anything? Tiana Hatfield, our program director, will send out an email with the recording and some of the links to you soon. But this is your chance. You've got Mason before he has to go back in. And what time are you due back in there?
I am not due back in at the moment. The hearing is likely going to be wrapping up in the next little bit. I might be joining for 1 or 2 congressional meetings after that. But most of the hard work was done this morning with prepping our witness and actually getting him to the right spot at the right time, taking some photos, that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm good if you need more time.
Good, great. All right, nobody else has questions? All right, well then we will let you go back to your day. Mason, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Like I mentioned, I've been talking to Mason about this, and another Parkinson's organization had offered a webinar like that, and I thought it was just really important for people. And we have South Carolina on here as well, so it's not just North Carolina. So this way, both states hopefully will get some touches, you know, to their congressional representatives and senators and things. I know I sent it out to all of the ones, even if they're not in my district. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't. I'd like to, just so they all know it, but I did send them out to everyone. It's so, like I said, so easy to do. The forms are easy, and don't be, and if you have any questions, you can call me. Also, I can, you know, let you get in, I can put you, you know, send your information to Mason, and I can get any questions from him. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Mason, again, thank you for your time. I hope the rain holds off for you, and have some good meetings later.
Look, so I just want to say really quickly, I'm from Eastern North Carolina. I have a close family friend whose name is Steve Potter, and he's been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease since I was in high school. This is incredibly impactful and important work to me, and I just appreciate every single one of you for taking time out of your day to learn about how you can be a part of this. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart as a North Carolinian with a personal connection. It's awesome that you guys are here and hearing me out today, so thank you.
Yes, thank you. Have a good rest of your day, everyone. Oh, oh, somebody had their hand raised. Oh, we missed him. Well, oh wait, Melissa. Oh, nope. Where'd she go? Nope. All right. Sorry.
Thank you.
Bye,
Have a good
everyone.
one.
Bye.
Bye-bye.